Good evening and welcome to the Blavatnik School of Government. I'm Nairi Woods, Dean of the school, and it's a real pleasure this evening to be hosting this event, which is a joint event of the Blavatnik School of Government and the Said School of Business, Said Business School. It's such a pleasure to be hosting Aigboje Aig-Imoukhuede. He is a member of the International Advisory Board of the Blavatnik School of Government, and a man from whom every one of us, whether in the private sector or the public sector or the not-for-profit charity sector, have much to learn. Aigboje Aig-Imoukhuede's story is partly told in this fantastic book. It is truly a readable book, hard to put down once you begin it. He's not just one of the most successful bankers in Nigeria, but one who is particularly known for his integrity and for his hard driving aspiration for excellence and achievement. Aigboje himself graduated at age 19 with a law degree from the University of Benin in Edo State, Nigeria, and was called to the bar in 1987. He must have been one of the youngest barristers in the country at this point. Aigboje Aig-Imoukhuede is also a man who, together with his wife Wigwe, is thoroughly committed to Nigeria and to doing what they can do to enhance public leadership and service across Nigeria. And it's that commitment that has led to a partnership with the Blavatnik School of Government to enhance public leadership in Nigeria. I'm very pleased this evening, alongside Aigboje Aig-Imoukhuede, to be hosting two special guests, each of whom will share their reflections and what they've learned from this terrific book, but also from Aigboje as a banker, a colleague, a mentor. When I first met Aruna Ote, who is with us this evening, she came marching into a meeting of the World Economic Forum to be part of a future council. She was at that time Director General of the Securities Exchange Commission in Nigeria, and so outstanding in that role that she was subsequently appointed to be Vice President and Treasurer at the World Bank, working with countries all over the world. Aruna is now on a special fellowship at the Said Business School. And thank you, Aruna, for being with us this evening. Our other special guest this evening is Louisa Chinedu Okeke. Louisa, we are extraordinarily proud of as a Blavatnik School of Government alumna. She is an AIG scholar, where the Africa Initiative for Governance scholarships were founded by Aigboje Aig-Imoukhuede to promote public sector leadership and those committed to going into public sector leadership in Nigeria. Louisa is a wonderful example of somebody who had a terrifically successful start to her career in the private sector, in KPMG, in consultancy. She excelled in the Master of Public Policy here at the Blavatnik School of Government, and she's now sitting in her office at work as Special Assistant to the President of Nigeria on Finance. Louisa, it's a special pleasure to have you here back in the school virtually with us this evening. Aigboje, I'd like to start by turning to you to ask you, I think the question that everybody wants to know, why did you write this book? What made you feel that you wanted to get this book down in print and share it with us?
Thank you very much, Nairi. And of course to your school, the Blavatnik School at Oxford, with whom we have such a great partnership. Thank you, Aruma. Thank you, Louisa. And of course, without the audience, what is a webinar? And so thank you to everybody who has dialed into our discussion this evening. Look, why did I write the book? It was written to inspire and motivate young Africans. I mean, that's why I wrote the book. I wanted them, and I want them, to dream big and to act with audacity and boldness. For me, my life, from adolescence up till this moment, as I speak on this webinar, has been full of reading. I come from a family of writers. As I've shared with you, Nairi, my kids are writers. In fact, this is the first thing that I've done that, has given me some brownie points as far as they're concerned in terms of achievement, So books have taught, books have mentored, books have inspired me personally. When I have a biography or an autobiography that I start reading and I can't put down, for me, it's a gift from the author to my life, you know. There are many things I look back in life, and I hope that there are many things to come that I have done or achieved that were motivated by books. And I'll be first to be honest enough to acknowledge that the inspiration for me many a time comes from a book I've read. Indeed, in leaving the tarmac, I shared, you know, the fact that if I had not read Buyout by, you know, Rick Rickerston, who is in finance and, you know, an MBA alumni member of Harvard Business School, I don't think I would have ended up buying my own bank, for instance, you know. Over the years, you know, every time I browse through the business section of a bookstore, you know, maybe at the airport, you know, you have these little kiosks where books are sold, and that's where I would go in an airport, or Glendora bookshops in Lagos. You know, I would look for a book, but one thing pained me, Nairi, and it was that there are very few business stories written about Black business owners. Mm-hmm. And even less so, even fewer books about African businesses. So I want the young African to know that there is nothing wrong with pursuing a big dream and having audacious ideas. There is one book I read about a Black businessman. It's called Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? Reginald Lewis. And I've read that book again and again and again. You know, I also wanted to use the opportunity to tell the world that there are periods in time when Nigeria can get its act together. Our return to democracy in 1999, led by President Obasanjo, unleashed this period which I call Nigeria's economic renaissance period. And, you know, talented men and women came together, you know, to develop and execute policies which gave real wind to the sales of Access Bank, and without which, for Access Bank and a host of other businesses that have gone on to become, you know, the Black unicorns, you know, from Africa today, you know, that story wouldn't have been possible. Those are the principal reasons why I wrote the book, Nairi.
And what, you know, it's quite rare that a man of driving action stops still for enough time to write a book and reflect on yourself. What did you learn about yourself writing this book? Did you learn things about yourself or reflect on yourself in a way that surprised you?
Yes. First of all, most people say that I am not somebody who is intimidated easily. Every day I wrote this book, I wrote it with some trepidation as to how the readers would find it. And that's not why I hesitated to publish it, though. But I did realize that there is nothing greater for the individual than setting yourself to a task where your confidence in its outcomes are not that strong. I find that particularly edifying. That's one thing that, you know, I enjoyed in writing the book. The other thing, of course, was that there were parts of the book that I chose not to leave in it. And I am still a very private person. And I realized and I found that there were certain things I wasn't prepared to share at the time. I think I will write a book about my own life, and it's going to be very interesting how much I'll be prepared to share, you know, in terms of the personal details.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to share any of the bits you left out with us this evening?
Nairi, I know you are very persuasive, but I prepared myself for this discussion. I will speak to what's in the book.
Very good. Well, I'm going to turn to each of Aruna and Louisa for a reflection on the book and some questions from them. And I'd also like to invite the audience to, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button. And please do feel free to send in your questions, and I will come through as many of them as I can during this wonderful opportunity to go beyond and through the book with its terrific author. So let me move now. Aruna Ote.
Thank you, Nairi, for hosting this event and for the opportunity to join you, Aig and Louisa, on this panel. A hearty congratulations, Aig, on this book and all that you and Wigwe do for society. The book is a must read and for many reasons. I think it's, first of all, an amazing account of the inside story of Access Bank's rise from a little known bank to one of the top banks in Africa. Indeed, for many years, I assumed that Aig and Herbert, we were just started a bank. I didn't even know there was a bank called Access Bank before they arrived on the scene. It's not just a primer for those interested in the banking industry, but also it's also a primer for those who want to learn how you start a business in any sector and succeed at scale in any emerging market and indeed in any country in the world. A number of things struck me reading the book. Let me share three. First, the importance to success of the nature of your response to the regulatory environment, the actions and the policies of government. Second, you do not have to compromise your integrity or high standards to succeed in emerging markets. And third, practical tips on entrepreneurial success and scaling a business. Let me start with my first point on government and the operating environment. Aig and Herbert Wigwe, his business partner, they bought a bank for $10 million, had to put in another $10 million to recapitalize it. And then the central bank came and raised the minimum capital requirements by 25 times to $250 million. And Access was one of 89 banks at the time. They were one of the 25 that survived the efforts of the Nigerian Central Bank to enhance the quality of the banking sector in Nigeria. Of course, Access, as many of you know, is one of the top banks in Africa today. I highlight in the book the importance of the operating environment to their success. I say it's the importance of how you leverage the operating environment. Specifically, he gives credit, and he mentioned it in his opening, to the Nigerian government's transformational reform agenda led by President Obasanjo. The reforms were far-reaching in the banking sector, the telecom sector, there were pension reforms, it included a privatization agenda. The pension reforms, for example, led to a pension industry that 10 years prior had liabilities of $12 billion, and then 10 years later, it was a $30 billion asset management industry that flourished. And Aig, I think that was one of the areas you also focused on. The book is specific about the importance of the reforms in the telecom sector to the transformation of the banking sector and the success of Access Bank. Aig acknowledges that the increase in the number of telephone connections from what was, I think, 450,000 to growing geometrically, and I think today it's about 200 million connections was important. The book showcases, in my view, that Aig had a clear vision of a desired future state of Nigeria as a prosperous nation that takes its rightful place in the world. He also had a vision of how Access Bank could successfully contribute to that desired future state. On my first point, you'll note that through the book, there are examples of Aig's service to society, his work as co-chair of the Global Business Coalition on Health, and Friends of Africa. The one that I want to share that he mentions in the book is, and this, I was in the government in Nigeria at the time, he talks about his acceptance of the challenging and dangerous task of leading the oil subsidy review. But what was great about that is, of course, the following year in 2012, Nigeria saved about $7 billion. One of my major takeaways is that Aig sees his reason for being on earth as more than what he will get out of life. It is obvious that he's living for something greater than himself. And so that's a lesson for me. It is an important message about how someone can live a life of service, even if you're in the private sector and you're not, a Mother Teresa, and you can still contribute to society. My second point, as I mentioned, is that the book is also very important to domestic and international experts and investors, that in emerging market countries like Nigeria, that you can have phenomenal success without compromising on your integrity and while maintaining the highest standards. Aig's core values resonate through the book. He talks about his belief in God, integrity, excellence as a mantra, never compromising his standards, hard work and diligence as taught by his parents. My third point is really to highlight the really useful examples of how you drive entrepreneurial success and scale a business methodically. I summarize it to say having the right balance of risk-taking and risk management, strategy and execution, and how that helps you in succeeding. Lots of nuggets of wisdom. Nairi, as you said, absolutely an enjoyable and easy read. The warning label that should be on the book is that it's hard to drop when you start. So plan appropriately. Thank you.
Aruna, thank you. That was magisterial, a wonderful lens on the book. And I'm going to come back to you for your question to Ike in a moment. But huge thanks to Aruna Orte for that terrific synopsis. Louisa, can I come to you? Louisa Chinedo Okeke.
Thank you, Nairi. Like everyone has said, the book is really quite a compelling story, and it's hard to drop when you start reading it. I'd like to just say, I first met with Mr. Aig-Imoukhuede when I applied for the Africa Initiative for Governance Scholarship that, led me to come into Oxford to study the public policy at the School of Government, and then transiting now into my role in the Office of the Vice President. And as an AIJ scholar, two things I found quite striking with the author of the book is his passion for developing human capacity in the public sector, and also his passion for excellence in general across several aspects of life. And the book, Leaving the Tarmac, sheds more light as to his belief that governance and institutional strengthening and the right policy environment would enable private sector-led growth. And he narrates in the book how he was able to build the bank amidst several regulatory regimes, how his team and himself were able to scale several policy hurdles, and many of which actually have led to the increased sophistication of the Nigerian banking sector as we know it today. And not just having a passion, he actually puts to work his passion, that which I have benefited from. The current partnership between the Africa Initiative for Governance and the BSG has been able to produce a pool of scholars, of which I'm one of those that have gone back to the African continent to begin to make changes in the policy environment. Looking at passion for excellence, he speaks a lot about himself and his partner, Mr. Herbert Wigwe, just that boldness to step out of their comfort zone, to buy up a bank that was a minority player in the industry, and just the drive for excellence again and again to ensure that this endeavor worked, and they were both able to build the bank to become one of the keen contenders amongst the top 5 banks in the country. Again, the book talks extensively about partnerships, alliances, and relationships that they had that aided them along the journey. And the author so rightly put it in the 6th chapter of his book, where he acknowledges the importance of partnerships and alliances in businesses. We find very intriguing the relationship he has had with his partner, which led to a very efficient succession planning in the Access Bank as at the time. I'll just say to anyone who wants to read the book that the book has a compelling story that will help you put to work your dreams and your ambition. It doesn't say that it will be easy, but it definitely shows you that it's possible with hard work and commitment.
Thank you very much, Louisa. Did you have a particular question that you would like to put to Mr. Aig-Imoukhuede?
Okay, I'd want to ask Mr. Aig, this question is for you. As you write this book, knowing that, you had a bit of an edge starting out really early, what would you say to young people who probably didn't start as early as you did, but who have this drive or entrepreneurial juices, as you put it in the book?
Yes, Aigboje, what about the poor normal creatures who get admitted to the bar at 25? Is it too late by then?
It's never too late. You know, I love something that people say about me is that some of my best friends are people who are much older than me. And I benefit so much from the privilege and the opportunity to spend time and call as friends or describe as friends people who could be my father. Louisa, to answer your question, there was a year that I visited China, and I was taken to China by President Obasanjo. He was then retired. This is after he was going to make this really major speech to the Chinese people, and he asked me to come along. And I wondered why, but for me, it was going to be a great experience. And we spent 3 days. On one of the days, he said we were going to visit his friend. And who was his friend? Yang Zemin. Retired then, but they were, for tea. And he told him he was going to bring me along and a couple of other people. And here was this man who has achieved so much, the former president of China, in retirement, well over 80. And I'm not sure which of us asks him, what are you doing now? And he says he started to learn his 7th language. Now, I just tell you this to say, just start. Whenever it is that you are hit by this ambition, this dream, this goal, start. And insofar as God gives you life and you make an impact for 1 second, 1 minute, 1 day, 1 week, wow, what have you added to the world? Greatness. That's my view.
Thank you, Ike. Aruna, what's your question for Ike?
Nairi, my question is actually similar to one that I see was asked by one of the participants, which is, does Ike feel that he could have the same success that he had when he started Access Bank today? And I ask that because I myself think that he was very humble about his contribution and Herbert's contribution to the success of Access Bank. And that's why I mentioned very specifically that there were 89 banks by the time you had the minimum capital requirements increased by the central bank. And there were only 25 that made it. So I'd like to, so someone else has asked my question, so it'll be great to hear him.
Fantastic, and thank you, David Nwanko, for your question. If you were setting up Access Bank today, Ike, in the current socioeconomic realities of Nigeria, do you think it would have taken off and become a success story? What's your advice to young aspiring entrepreneurs today, given the current dysfunctional economic and political realities?
Thank you, Aruna, and thank you, David, for the question. I guess, the first thing that you're gonna have to agree with me and, is that your question suggests that in doing this, right, I would still have my partner, I would still have the team, I would still have, the nature of the person who is driving the process. That's Aigboje Aig-Imoukhuede. I would still have my wife, I would still have my family. So, and most importantly, I would still have God on my side. So I think the odds are still stacked very much in my favor. You are saying the only thing is that, the economic circumstances and the policy context in Nigeria are different. And your question, therefore, is, can it happen again? That's the way I look at, your question. The first thing I would say is that, look, if you read my book, it will be clear to you that the default setting for my aspirations is a high level of excellence. And probably the reason why Herbert and I are so close, and we've been so close, ever since we met, which was just after our banking career started. I write about it in the book, is that We share the same DNA. Our default setting for aspirations is a high level of excellence. And I take pains to write in the book that this comes from being born at a time when Nigeria enjoyed its greatest success. Herbert and I lived a reality, and not just us, people of our generation, where we as Nigerians, we believed that Nigerians were the greatest people on earth. As an adolescent, the authors I knew went on to win the Nobel Prize. The artists I grew up with were world famous. Kings and queens sat for them whilst they did their portraits. The schools, universities, and the civil servants I knew in Nigeria were world class and were commended as such all over the world. That's the Nigeria I was born into. And that's the Nigeria I want today. Now, people of my generation, having lived that reality, don't think that today's circumstances can stop us. Don't think that today's circumstances are impossible to overcome. Let me tell you something. Just before Obasanjo's time from 1999, a few months before, we were a pariah nation that owed a basket case, about to become a failed state. So it's not as if oil prices were much lower than they have been at any time now. When Obasanjo came in, oil prices were single digits. So it wasn't as if Nigeria worked then. So my message is that Nigeria can get it right again. And I'll tell you something more. If we get it right, Africa will get it right. Mandela said the world will not respect Africa until Nigeria earns that respect. I believe this to be true. So would it be hard work doing it now? Of course it would be. Was it hard work then? Of course it was. But with God on my side, with Herbert as my partner, most importantly with Ofowe as my wife, I'm sure we could do it again.
Thank you so much, Aigboje. Just on that, just picking up on the partnership theme, you know, many students leave Oxford to set up businesses or to, you know, create an enterprise in partnership with each other. And it quite often ends up with them going their separate ways. You know, they'll come and say, oh, he's not working hard enough, or she has a different goal, or, you know, I will sometimes see alumni and they'll explain why the partnership broke up. So what would your tips be for people who are building a business together in a partnership?
Thanks, Larry. You know, when people comment on my relationship with Herbert, interestingly, and I'm speaking about this now, even in a context, in an academic or probing context, okay? The question is, how has your partnership thrived and survived for so long, okay? And I understand that. But then let me add that it's not to say I haven't read. Remember I told you about what reading does for me. I've read about several partnerships that have thrived and have lasted 40, 50 years. Hewlett-Packard, Ling and Fung, these are organizations, not necessarily even in Africa, where you see partnership thrive. Now, with Herbert, people have said, so a lot of the time I have a younger brother, okay? Sometimes, in fact, most times when people say, how is your brother? They're not talking about my biological brother. They're talking about Herbert, even if both of them were in the room. If my brother was in the room and Herbert was in the room, and they would say, how is your brother? And they won't be talking about my biological brother. They'll be talking about Herbert. Now, this is my view, and this is my take on partnership, friendship. Whether it's a business partnership, whether it is a romantic partnership, which I have with my wife, okay? It's like gardening, that partnership, that relationship will thrive to the extent that the partners invest in it, and you must, water it. You must weed it. You must constantly tend to it. And like every good garden, the minute you are too tired to do what you must do, the minute you are too distracted to do what you must do, it then begins to deteriorate. It begins to suffer. And most times, the reason why partnerships don't last is not because people were not compatible. It's because for whatever reason, they could not find the common chord to make them make the sacrifices you must do to make any relationship work.
Fantastically wise advice there. I'm going to give you two questions which are quite similar from the audience. Stuart Rawlins asks, what piece of advice would you give to a young Nigerian who is trying to set up a business and struggling for financing? And in a similar vein, Osemhen says, how do you invest courageously in the risk of currency devaluation, opaque regulatory landscape, insecurity, etc.? How do you mitigate those risks as an entrepreneur? So two questions coming from people in the entrepreneurial space.
Okay, so the first thing is, I'll tell you a secret. Okay? If you have a good idea in most African countries, and you have the capacity to see that idea through by adding value to whoever it is that's going to consume whatever you produce or whatever you sell by way of a service. If you start with your local currency, okay? If you start with your local currency and you're good at what you do, you should do well in your local currency. Okay, let's start there. So when you speak to me about economic circumstances, all right, I invest in Nigeria knowing that every 10 years, the Nigerian Naira devalues 100%. It's not an event, but over every 10 years, you know, it devalues 100%. In a similar vein, okay, the US economy, right, as Naira teaches, grows immutably between 1.7% and 3.1%, you know. So again, you know, these type of things are things that you must bring to bear in going into a business. You don't, I don't, when I take leaps of faith, okay, they are extremely calculated. Louisa spoke about the amount of time we spend researching and thinking through, testing and learning. You can't go into Nigeria just as you can't go into the Chinese economy without understanding it. The fact that it is challenging doesn't mean you can't thrive in it. The only point is this: there are many things you can take for granted in an advanced economy that you cannot take for granted in a transition or an emerging economy. And most times, people get into trouble because they haven't done their homework. Then don't get it wrong. I'm not saying that it's easy to have a shop where you have to be your own power generating company, you have to be your own police security company, and so on, as you have in Nigeria. This imposes higher costs, which I guess is what reflects in inflation. But then there are many things that count, you know, on the plus side for Nigeria. For example, you have 200 million people who are just looking to be served. You have very little competition for most things you will be serving them with. The trick is for you to say, I am prepared to, like I was, okay? This is the trick. I am prepared to, you may not like what I'm going to say, but you, like I was, I'm prepared to die in the process of serving my customer. If you are in Africa, you will do well.
Wow, that's a powerful credo. Aruna, I know you've got a couple of questions for Aig.
Yes, Nairi. There's a place in the book where Aig, actually, early in the book, he talks about the fact that when you buy a bank, you know, the assumption is that you'll get to be the CEO. So he and Herbert had planned to be the CEO and the deputy CEO. And he actually waited 3 years before he was given the opportunity to be the CEO of his organization. And I mentioned that to highlight some of the things that were for me fascinating. And The question that I have, my first question to you is, when you're dealing with a challenge like that, and generally, what are some of the ways that you keep yourself focused? Because I mean, 3 years, and you saw your other colleagues were being made CEOs of their banks. So that's my first question.
I love that question because I think it contextualizes this issue, which is real, about would it be different today, or are the challenges today different from the challenges then, and so on. Okay, now by Nigerian law, okay, to be the CEO of a bank, all right, you have to be approved by the central bank, okay? And if you are running a bank where you know you do not have the formal approval of the central bank, where you know that every day you go out and you come back and you could get a letter that says, what are you doing there? We haven't approved you. That every day you are in the newspapers or you're talking to a client and so on, right? There could be somebody in authority who is just pissed off that why are these guys doing and thriving so well? You know, it can send you bonkers. And if you don't have faith, it's difficult to do that kind of thing. If you don't have a wife like I do, all right, who understands and who stabilizes and so on. And I mean, when I say my wife had to quit her job and her career in Citibank, she may have bought her own bank if she didn't quit for me, okay? I wouldn't have been able to do it, okay? Now, are those challenges any less onerous than the challenges you face today? Of course, I mean, they're the same. To those who ask whether there's a right time or there's a good time or whatever it is. I mean, and I've read about another man who had to go to a church service and hold the garment of the vice president to get his banking license, you know, as if it was like holding the garment of Jesus Christ. So look, I mean, and this was 20 or 30 years before my time. So it can never be easy. One thing is clear in all the books I have read about people, whether in government, whether in sports, whether in business, who have been able to operate at or higher than that default setting I've talked about of high excellence, is the amount of sacrifices is awesome. And, you know, I say to people, really, if you aren't prepared to make that type of sacrifice, don't seek that type of ambition.
Wow. I really appreciate that, because I found it very unique that you were very focused on your ambition and what you wanted to achieve. And none of those things, in fact, if anything, it propelled you to even excel more, so that in 2005, you then got appointed Chief Executive Officer of Access Bank, of your bank, that you had bought to be CEO.
Well, Ruma, the painful thing about it was that, I had acted as CEO of Access Bank with Central Bank, approval. I had, the deputy governor, one of the deputy governors wanted to make me, it was one man. But then again, that's what doing business in an emerging market also entails. And I didn't, I wrote about the book to describe the reality of the situation. That one man remained my friend afterwards. He contacted me, and I always responded to him. I don't take these things personally. I kind of understand, when discretion is not rightly applied. I don't approve of it, but I kind of understand the circumstances.
But maybe it takes me, Nairi, to my second question to Aig, which is really those core values. Because, I was a regulator in Nigeria for 5 years, and from having known Aig for a very long period of time, and even from how he describes his experience, he was always respectful of regulators, and he carried them along in the things that he was doing. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about those early foundations and those core values, which I saw throughout the book, that you kept referring to. I'd like to hear it from you as to how important it is in your success.
So Aruma, in Africa, I think that without faith, you see, and the reason why I say this is that, look, in the advanced economies, right, you have created over time, and I'm talking over, in some instances, centuries, okay, a playbook for enlightened living, okay? And so you have infrastructure, you have a rule of law, you have a social life that is full of quality, etc., okay? Now, we are yet to attain this in Africa. Okay? And therefore, we don't have the safety nets that the individual in the UK, for example, has. And I'll give you a simple example. I got a letter from my daughter's school recently, and it was a great letter. And it was a letter that said, there's a Nigerian student, that we want to get a scholarship, needy student and so on. And could you help us find a Nigerian philanthropist that would take this on? And I said, I would love to. However, and I would try, but look, there are 100 million of these cases in Nigeria, you see. So for the philanthropist to pick this particular, individual, it's not going to be easy. Okay? So the message therefore is that, you either have faith in God, all right, or you rely on, individuals. I chose the faith in God path. It's my nature, it's my DNA. So you will, and Aruma, you know that there is no big man in my life. There is no godfather in my life. It's just not, because so there is God in my life. Okay, that's value number one. Okay. Now it's also, of course, I've spoken about excellence. All right. I'm also an extremely loyal person. You know that I will back for people that I believe in. I mean, so and people respond to that. I don't make new friends easy. If you see me and so on, you'll be able to trace back one way or the other the person that I am with. I would know you. I would know your circle of influence. I would know you. I'll be comfortable with you. That's also something that's very important to me. In our time, Aruma, you know that integrity was something that was, if you didn't imbibe it through mentoring, and it was flogged into you. Sorry to say this on this type of call. You're not just your parents, your uncles, aunties, your school teachers will beat the hell out of you if you don't imbibe integrity. That's how, that's how we grew up. So integrity was not an option. It was the way. Okay? So these really basic fundamental values that are not any different from the values that, most enlightened societies, uphold, are the things that drive me. I think the difference really between me and the typical Nigerian is that I still believe there is a reason to fight for those values. Mm-hmm. The typical Nigerian has been so beaten, okay, by the process of degree, the deterioration of the society, etc. You start saying, is it, let's, but the problem is that each time each of us say, let's stop fighting, then the bad guys win, however few they are, because they are not in the majority. They are not in the majority. They're just taking a prominence of position. Now, each time those of us who are in the majority say it's not worth it, then they win. And that is what I've dedicated my life to doing. Let's go back to that time when the majority of us said it's worth it. It's worth creating this great nation. And then the bad guys will become less and less able to hold the nation to ransom.
Let me throw the next question to Louisa. Louisa.
Thank you, Nairi. I have two questions, if I may, but I'll start with the first one to Mr. Aig. Again, it's about the younger generation. In your book, you spoke, at different points about how you benefited from mentorship of your senior colleagues at work, particularly the founder of GT, Mr. Fola. I want to find out from you, and you have alluded to it, that the younger generation, there are some differences between then and now. So over time, how have you learned, or how do you see yourself mentoring the younger generation to, achieve feats like yours or even bigger?
Yes, given that you can't flog them as your aunties and uncles did with you, like, what's the contemporary version of that?
No flogging. Not in our time. But just yesterday I was talking to 10 young people from my ecosystem. All of them, apart from one, was 25 to work in my office. Okay, my own personal office. So it's like I rotate every 2 years. 3 of them come in to work in my office in terms of business, my business office now, my business life. Okay, and and so 5 of them, okay, were aligned with my thinking. 5 of them were less aligned with my thinking. Okay? And as I had this discussion with them, when I say thinking, I'm talking of my generation's thought process versus their generation's thought process. Okay? So I said to myself, this is it again. All right? How do I ensure that I keep raising my game in terms of ensuring that out of 10, okay, all right, I don't just work with 5, I can work with all 10, even if the generational differences with 5 of them are very strong, as as compared to my thoughts and my ideas and ways of doing things. One of the first things I did when I left running Access Bank was to go back to school. I went and did the Triumph MBA. And the class typically is younger than me. Typically, there are 1 or 2 people who are my age, but younger than me. And it was so that I could, unpack a number of these notions that I held to be true about the world today. And it was something of an eye-opener for me, to be honest. If I hadn't done it, I think that some people may have accused me of flogging in today's day. Not necessarily that, but in my own way and my own approach to doing things. And I really feel cool now when I'm with my peers, and I'm telling them, you don't get it. I really feel cool. And the benefit of that was being able to spend 2 years in a classroom with people of a generation, younger than mine. And then in terms of the young generation, the most humbling part of my life today, I'll tell you, Naire, I'll tell you, Aruma, and I'll tell you, Louisa, and everybody on this call, is debating and coming to terms with the views of my children. So if I can't lead them, what can I lead? So if you want to learn how to lead and how to work with the generation that is taking the world today, all right, start with your children. And I almost lost that opportunity during the time I was in Access Bank. I didn't spend as much time as you have to spend with any generation to understand it, and with any set of people, to build those type of relationships that you're alluding to Naire. But this is one thing that I would not say that I have mastered, how to work with Gen Z, I think, and the other generations, to come. But I'm working hard at it. It's one of those humbling things. It's like writing a book.
It's what tennis players, tennis champions say, that the champions are the people who work on the things that they need the most improvement on. And the others just practice the things they're good at. Louisa, what's your second question for Ike?
Okay, just quickly, in your book, you talked about how it seemed like everything came together for the success of Access Bank at the time. Like you had the right regulatory environment, forward thinking in the public sector, and then you had leadership in private sector. I'm just saying, should the policy environment and the regulatory environment be disempowering for private sector businesses. Through your experience, what can a private sector business do? Is it a situation where they're helpless, there isn't anything they can do, or how can they go about,
Okay.
And sorry, can I add to that? I'm sorry, because it's a very similar question from Mausi Owolabani, who's another member of the Blavatnik school community. Hi, Mausi, who asks, what do you think the private sector can do in light of the current unfavorable regulatory landscape towards fintechs, digital startups and businesses? So it's a similar question. In this unfavorable environment, what is it that the new business leaders can or should do?
So these are two great questions from two, well done, thank you. I'm going to start with the second question first, because it's a targeted question. It's probably easier to approach in the limited time. And then I'll see how much time we have on the question that Louisa asked. So globally, all right, the regulatory and policy environment is trying to come to terms with forces that seem to suggest that to thrive, they can't control. Okay, so the challenge about technology is this. Technology thrives best in the 21st century by putting into the hands of the user much more power than the user ever had with respect to anything of utility. So let's call it an aircraft. Before, the notion was, right, the greatest thing in private flying was the Concorde. The notion today is the greatest thing in private flying is you are going to be able to go to the moon and further, okay? Buy a ticket to the moon. I mean, it's mind-boggling, okay? There was a time when I remember the first laptops, let me say suitcases that you put a computer in. Those were the first laptops. I was in banking then. And today you have devices that have more computing power than parts of the Pentagon, 20, 30 years ago. I'm talking about a mobile phone, okay? Now, where am I going? This power in the hands of the consumer makes government uncomfortable. Not because government is just government, but because this power is moving faster than government is able to regulate or think about how to, bring it under control for the benefit of all of us. So there's this necessary tension. This tension will never be addressed unless the people in government are thinking at the same capacity level and understanding as the people who are bringing up these technologies. And that is where you have this really difficult tension. And you're seeing it not just in Nigeria and Africa, you're seeing it in China, you're seeing it in the US, you're seeing it, but today I was marveled by the fact that the Bahamas has announced that it's going to adopt a digital currency, the first nation in the world to actually say we're doing it. Now, not an alternative, not like Bitcoin, but it's going to really bring into the mainstream that which, and isn't it a wonder it takes a small country like that to kind of get us thinking about, do we have to be so scared about these new technologies? But then from the perspective of the private sector, you can't just sit there lobbing stones at the government for not understanding. You've got to work with them. You've got to educate them. You've got to do what I do, inspire them, win their trust. And the only way to do that is to let them see what you see. And it's not easy, but it's going to be worth it when you succeed in doing so. But then on to Louisa's question. There are some businesses in the world that I really pity the businessmen in those businesses. But in Nigeria, there's a joke I tell. It's not my joke. I got it from somebody, but I love it, which is to say that, a group of Nigerian businessmen, entrepreneurs, men and women, got to the gates of heaven. And when they got there, they saw entrepreneurs from Latin America, entrepreneurs from Asia, entrepreneurs from North America and Europe, in a queue, making their case to get into heaven. And when the Nigerians came, the gates of heaven were thrown open for them. And, all the other entrepreneurs said, why? Unfair, they're jumping the queue, blah, 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 blah. And the angel said, look, these guys have been in hell. Pardon my joke, all Nigerians, but it's funny. And there is some truth to it. So I guess that's what Louisa is asking. I mean, how do you operate when things are very uncomfortable? Well, you can't do it alone. I've told you about this notion of, if you must partner, you must find like minds. One person can be beaten down, two, a bit more difficult to beat two down, and even more, So what I've always tried to do, Louisa, is this. You try and create an oasis of sanity in your own organization. Make that organization so super strong on these issues that you face, that when you come together, you become a prevailing force over those issues. And yes, you may all go home to the reality of being in Nigeria, and when you're in your houses and so on, these things overwhelm you once again. But anytime you come together, the force, is for good, and the force wins. Now,
I know it's 6 o'clock, our time is up, but we cannot close this session without asking you what next. Tony Ademola writes in the questions, have you considered running for president? Is that what's next? Tell us what next.
Look, my life is focused on Africa. And I've told you that my view, and it aligns with Mandela's view, is that Africa really stands no chance if Nigeria doesn't get it right. So if you get Nigeria working, you get Africa working. That's my view. And to get Nigeria and Africa working, we need excellent performance in public governance, in health, and in all the things that provide the goods that allow citizens to thrive. Ofowe and I, and a talented team, very talented team, is growing every day, are working to ensure that we make government better able to provide public goods and services in a way that is no different from what you enjoy in the UK today, what those in North America enjoy, and so on. And it's not easy, but we started, we have now a relationship with the Blavatnik School of Government that is training and developing individuals who go back and be the president's advisor, as Louisa is. And my aim is that 20, 30 years, okay, with the many things, we are launching the Public Leaders Program for Nigeria that is going to bring out, hopefully, 100 or more a year. My aim is that in 20 years' time, we actually have thousands of Louisas in various parts of government in Nigeria, and maybe a few thousand more in other parts of government outside, in other countries outside Nigeria. That is what we require to change. You don't need to reform. We shouldn't focus on, today I'm doing this, this drive to fix primary healthcare centers. But look, if we have 1, 2, 3,000 able men and women in government, they would be doing these things. So let's focus on the leaders. Let's focus on bringing this, pool of talent into the public sector. And I think that things will not be the same again. That's what I'm spending my time on doing now. Whether I do it as a private sector player, or which is what I do now, or I do it as a member of the public sector in future, I think you guys have to talk to Ofowe about that, and spend some time talking to her about that as well. But for now, I'm driving this from the private sector angle.
Aigboje, Aig-Imoukhuede, there are fantastic questions and testimonials to you in the column here. Chibuese Ewusi, Toby Uba, Edwin Enwigbara. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of your questions. I'm sure you will have other opportunities, but now it is just for me to say a huge thank you to Aruna Ote, to Louisa Chinedu Okeke. I mean, with Nigerians like this, there's no stopping Nigeria. You've been fantastic. And most of all, I thank you to Aigboje Aig-Imoukhuede, not just for writing such a wonderful, readable book, and do go out and get the book because it is terrific, but for your leadership in both private sector and public sector, Aigboje, and indeed here at Oxford for helping Oxford be a better place. Thank you from all of us. And thank you all for joining us this evening at the Blavatnik School of Government.
Thank you, Neri. Thank you, Aruma. Thank you, Louisa.
Thank you.